The crimson sand of Kepler. 442b shifted beneath Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen's boots as she surveyed the remains of New Shanghai Colony. What had once been humanity's most prosperous settlement beyond Earth's solar system now lay in smoldering ruins. The acrid smell of burned plasteel and worse things filled her nostrils through the damaged filters of her combat helmet. 12,000 civilians, she whispered into her comm unit, her voice barely audible over the howling wind that swept across the devastated landscape. Gone in 6 hours. The response crackled back through static-laden channels from General Morrison aboard the UES Defiance, humanity's flagship battlecruiser orbiting high above the planet. Sarah, I know this is hard to see, but we need your assessment. What are we dealing with? Chun knelt beside what remained of a defensive barrier, running her scarred fingers along the edges of the metal that had been sliced through like paper. The cuts were too clean, too precise for conventional weapons. She had seen similar damage patterns before, during the first contact incident at Proxima Station 3 months ago, but never on this scale. The SE Qatar, she said finally, they're not just raiders anymore, General. This was systematic extermination. The SE Qatar Dominion had first appeared in human space 18 months earlier, emerging from the void between star systems like phantoms materializing from nightmare. They were tall, elegant beings with chitinous exoskeletons that gleamed like polished obsidian and for arms that moved with fluid precision. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, their ships capable of folding space itself to appear anywhere they chose. But it wasn't their technological superiority that made them truly terrifying. It was their absolute contempt for what they called soft-flesh species. Chen's squad of 20 Marines spread out across the colony's central plaza, their movements careful and measured. Each soldier bore the distinctive markings of Earth's Special Operations Division, the infamous Devil Dogs who had earned their reputation in the brutal campaigns of the Jupiter mining wars and the Martian independence conflict. These weren't fresh recruits or weekend warriors. They were humanity's finest, veterans of a dozen conflicts, men and women who had stared death in the face and lived to tell about it. Sergeant Major Rodriguez emerged from the ruins of what had been the colony's administrative center, his dark face grim beneath his helmet's visor. Colonel, you need to see this. Chun followed him through the twisted wreckage, stepping carefully around debris and the occasional blast crater. The administrative building's main hall had been preserved almost intact, as if the attackers had deliberately left it untouched. On the far wall, burned into the reinforced concrete in letters 3 feet tall, was a message written in perfect human script. Soft flesh breaks. Hard shell endures. Submit or perish. Below the message, arranged with methodical precision, were the personal effects of the colony's leadership. Wedding rings, family photos, children's toys, all that remained of lives cut short by an enemy that viewed humanity as nothing more than an infestation to be eradicated. They want us to find this, Rodriguez said, spitting into the dust. They want us scared. Chun studied the message for a long moment, her mind racing through tactical assessments and strategic implications. The SE Qatar had struck 7 human colonies in the past 6 months, each attack more devastating than the last. They moved with impunity through human space, their advanced stealth technology making them virtually undetectable until they were already firing. Traditional military doctrine proved useless against an enemy that could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Colonel, came another voice over the comm. Corporal Martinez was calling from the colony's outer perimeter. We've got movement. 3 clicks southeast, moving this way. Chen's hand instinctively moved to her sidearm, a modified plasma pistol that had served her well through 15 years of military service. Survivors? Negative, ma'am. SEK TAR Patrol, 6 individuals. They're heading straight for us. The Marines of Chen's unit were already moving before she gave the order, falling into defensive positions with a fluid precision that marked elite troops. They had trained for this scenario countless times in the virtual reality chambers aboard the Defiance, but simulation could never truly prepare someone for facing an enemy whose very presence seemed to radiate menace. The SE Qatar patrol approached with the confident stride of predators who had never encountered meaningful resistance. Each warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall, their obsidian carapaces gleaming with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with their alien heartbeats. They carried energy weapons that hummed with barely contained power, devices that could cut through the heaviest human armor like it was tissue paper. Leading the patrol was a figure that made even the other SEK-TAR seem small by comparison. War Commander Vexhai was a legend among his people, a warrior who had personally overseen the conquest of 17 different species across the galaxy. His carapace bore the ritual scarification that marked him as one of the Dominion's most elite fighters, and his four arms moved in perfect coordination as he gestured for his warriors to spread out and encircle the human position. Soft flesh. Vexhai's voice carried easily across the distance, translated by universal communication devices that had been recovered from destroyed human ships. You have come to witness the price of resistance. Look upon this place and despair. This is the fate that awaits all who oppose the Dominion. Chin stepped out from behind cover, her rifle held at the ready but not directly threatening. The tactical computers in her helmet were already analyzing the enemy formation, calculating firing solutions and probability matrices. The numbers weren't encouraging. Standard doctrine said that a single SEK-TAR warrior was equivalent to 5 human soldiers in direct combat. "I am Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chun of the United Earth Forces," she called out, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "By the Articles of Interstellar Warfare, I demand to know why your forces attacked a civilian target in violation of established conventions." The sound that emerged from Vexhai's throat might have been laughter, if laughter could be made of grinding stone and breaking glass. "Conventions?" He gestured with one clawed hand toward the ruins surrounding them. "What conventions exist between apex predators and prey animals? You speak of laws and treaties as if you have the strength to enforce them." "We have more strength than you might think," Chin replied. "Do you?" Vexhai began walking forward, his warriors maintaining perfect formation around him. "Your species fascinates me, soft flesh. You are weak, slow, fragile. Your lives pass in the blink of an eye. Your technology is primitive, your weapons inadequate. Yet you persist in this delusion that you can stand against those who have conquered the stars since before your son was born." The war commander paused, tilting his head to study Chun with eyes that glowed like emeralds in the dying light of Kepler 442b's red dwarf sun. "I have studied your military records, human. I know of your wars, your conflicts, the way you turn your violence upon each other in endless cycles of destruction. You are a species born for servitude, yet you refuse to accept your place in the natural order." Chin's finger rested lightly on her rifle's trigger. Around the plaza, her Marines were invisible in their concealed positions, but she could feel their presence like a coiled spring waiting to be released. These weren't the green recruits that the SEK-TAR had faced in their previous encounters. These were soldiers who had been forged in the crucible of humanity's most brutal conflicts, who had learned to turn their species' greatest weakness, their fragility, into their most dangerous asset. "Maybe that's true," Chin said quietly. "Maybe we are weaker than you. Maybe our lives are shorter, our technology less advanced. But there's one thing you've never bothered to learn about humanity, War Commander. And what is that, soft flesh?" Chin's smile was visible even through her helmet's visor, an expression that held no warmth whatsoever. "We're really, really good at killing things that are stronger than we are." The signal came not through spoken words or hand gestures, but through the subtle shift in her stance that every Marine in her unit had been trained to recognize. In the span of a single heartbeat, the ruins of New Shanghai Colony exploded into violent motion. Sergeant Major Rodriguez's first shot took the leftmost SEK-TAR warrior center mass, the depleted uranium penetrator round punching through supposedly impenetrable carapace like it was made of cardboard. The alien's agonized shriek echoed across the plaza as it collapsed, green ichor spraying from the massive wound. Corporal Martinez emerged from concealment with a weapon that hadn't appeared in any official military manual, a modified mining laser that could cut through starship hulls. The beam caught another SEK-TAR warrior in the shoulder, severing one of its arms in a spray of superheated alien blood. But it was Private Williams who provided the most shocking moment. The 19-year-old Marine from Detroit had been carrying what appeared to be a standard-issue assault rifle. Only when he fired did it become clear that the weapon had been heavily modified, loaded with explosive rounds that had been designed specifically for use against SEK-TAR physiology. The alien warrior he targeted simply disintegrated, its carapace unable to contain the hydrostatic shock of the specialized ammunition. For the first time in their species' long history of conquest, the SEK-TAR found themselves facing an enemy that had studied them as carefully as they had studied their prey. Every weakness in their armor, every gap in their defenses, every instinctive reaction that their warrior culture had bred into them, it had all been cataloged, analyzed, and turned against them. War Commander Vexhai moved within human speed, his energy weapon tracking toward Chen's position with deadly precision. But the human colonel was no longer where she had been standing. Years of combat experience had taught her that the secret to fighting superior enemies was never to be where they expected you to be. Chen's rifle barked 3 times in rapid succession, each shot aimed not at the War Commander's center mass, but at the joints where his carapace plates connected. The shots were perfect, placed with the precision that only came from countless hours of practice, and the desperate knowledge that failure meant not just death, but the extinction of everything she held dear. Vexhai staggered, green fluid leaking from the cracks in his armor. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt something he had not experienced since his youth: fear. Not of death, which was always a possibility in combat, but fear of the realization that his entire understanding of the universe had been fundamentally wrong. Impossible, he gasped, his universal translator struggling to convey the complex mixture of emotions in his voice. You are weak. You are prey. How do you fight with such precision, such coordination? Chun stepped closer, her rifle trained on his head. Around the plaza, the remaining Esikatar warriors lay dead or dying, taken down by soldiers they had dismissed as beneath notice. You want to know our secret, War Commander? You want to understand how soft flesh fights hard shell? She reached up and removed her helmet, letting her dark hair fall free as she met the alien's glowing gaze with her own steady brown eyes. We're not strong like you. We're not fast like you. We don't have natural armor or energy weapons built into our bodies. But we have something you don't understand, something your perfect warrior society never taught you to recognize. What? Vexhai's voice was barely a whisper. We're desperate, Chen said simply. Every day of our lives, every moment of our existence, we're reminded of how fragile we are, how easily we can die, how quickly everything we love can be taken away from us. You see that as weakness. We've learned to make it our strength. She gestured to the Marines around her, each one a walking testament to humanity's refusal to go quietly into extinction. Every soldier in my unit has lost someone to your raids. Every one of them has stared at the ceiling in the dark hours before dawn and wondered if today was the day they would die. You think fear makes us weak, but fear keeps us alive. Fear makes us think. Fear makes us prepare for every possibility, plan for every contingency, turn every disadvantage into a weapon. War Commander Vexhai struggled to rise, his massive frame shaking with the effort. You think you have one? This changes nothing. The Dominion has 1,000 fleets, 1,000,000 warriors. Your entire species could not stand against even a fraction of our power. Maybe not, Chen agreed. But that's what you said about New Shanghai Colony, wasn't it? Just another easy target, another group of soft flesh to be harvested or exterminated. How did that work out for you? The War Commander's response was interrupted by the sound of approaching engines. 3 Esikatar attack craft were descending from orbit, their sleek forms cutting through the planet's thin atmosphere like deadly arrows. Chen's comm unit crackled to life as General Morrison's voice cut through the static. Sarah, we're reading multiple contacts inbound on your position. 3 light attack ships, probably coming to pick up that patrol. You need to extract immediately. Chen looked down at the wounded Vexhai, then at her Marines as they efficiently collected their gear and prepared to fall back to the extraction point. The attack craft were still minutes away, but Esikatar technology was unpredictable. They could arrive early, or they could bring reinforcements. Copy that, General, she said into her comm. But we're not leaving empty-handed. She knelt beside the War Commander, her rifle still trained on his head. Here's what's going to happen. You're coming with us. Your people can have you back when they agree to sit down and discuss terms like civilized beings instead of massacring civilians. Vexhai's laugh was a sound like breaking stone. You would take me prisoner? You would dare to lay hands upon a War Commander of the Dominion. Watch me. The extraction was a masterpiece of military precision. Chen's Marines moved through the ruins of New Shanghai Colony like ghosts, carrying their wounded prisoner with an efficiency that spoke of countless hours of training. By the time the Esikatar attack craft arrived at the patrol's last known position, they found only empty ruins and the bodies of 6 warriors who had been dispatched with surgical precision. Aboard the UES Defiance, The medical bay had been hastily converted into a makeshift prison cell. HFY physiology was still largely a mystery to human science, but the basic principles of containment were universal. Force fields, redundant security systems, and armed guard around the clock ensured that War Commander HFY would remain exactly where humanity needed him to be. General Morrison stood before the alien prisoner, his weathered face showing no trace of the satisfaction he felt at finally capturing a high-ranking HFY officer. Behind him, a team of linguists, xenobiologists, and intelligence analysts worked to extract every piece of useful information from their unexpected guest. "You cannot hold me," HFY said, his 4 arms restrained by energy shackles that had been designed specifically for HFY physiology. "The Dominion does not negotiate for prisoners. They will come for me, and when they do, your ship will burn." "Maybe," Morrison replied. "But in the meantime, you're going to help us understand your people. Your technology, your tactics, your fleet dispositions. Everything we need to know to make sure what happened to New Shanghai Colony never happens again." The War Commander's laughter filled the medical bay. "You still do not understand, do you? You think this is a war that can be won through conventional means. You think capturing one commander, killing one patrol, will somehow change the fundamental nature of this conflict." He leaned forward as far as his restraints would allow, his glowing eyes fixed on Morrison's face. "This is not a war, soft flesh. This is an extermination. Your species is a disease that has spread too far, consumed too many resources, claimed too many worlds that rightfully belong to your betters. We are the cure." Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the alien warrior who spoke of genocide with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost conversational. "You know, War Commander, there's something I think you should understand about human military doctrine. We have a saying in our army: no plan survives contact with the enemy. It means that no matter how well you prepare, no matter how thoroughly you study your opponent, combat has a way of surprising you." He gestured toward the viewport that showed the star field beyond, where human patrol ships were already spreading out in search patterns designed to locate and intercept HFY forces. "You've studied our wars, our history, our technology. But you've made one crucial mistake. You've assumed that the humans you've been fighting represent the best we have to offer." HFY's expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his alien features. "The colonies you've been hitting," Morrison continued, "the outposts and settlements and trading stations, those were defended by local militias, security forces, maybe a few regular army units if they were lucky. Good soldiers, brave men, and women who died protecting their homes. But they weren't us." He nodded toward the corridor where Chun and her Marines were quartered. "The Special Operations Division represents less than 1% of humanity's military forces. We're the soldiers who get called in when a regular army isn't enough. We're the ones who specialize in impossible missions, hopeless odds, and enemies who think they can't be beaten." Morrison leaned closer to the prisoner, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Here's the thing about apex predators, War Commander. They're used to being at the top of the food chain. They get comfortable, maybe a little careless. And sometimes, just sometimes, they discover that the prey they've been hunting has teeth they never noticed." The interrogation continued for hours, but War Commander HFY revealed little of tactical value. The HFY were a proud species, their warrior culture built around concepts of honor and superiority that made cooperation with inferior species almost impossible. But his very presence aboard the Defiance was valuable in ways that went beyond intelligence gathering. For the first time since first contact, humanity had proof that the HFY could bleed, could be captured, could be beaten by soldiers who fought with desperation instead of honor, who turned their weaknesses into strengths and their fear into fury. In her quarters, Lieutenant Colonel Chun sat before a holographic display that showed the tactical situation across human space. Red markers indicated confirmed HFY activity, yellow showed probable enemy presence, and green represented human forces moving to intercept. The picture that emerged was sobering. Humanity was outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting for its very survival against an enemy that viewed them as vermin to be exterminated. But for the first time since the war began, the red markers weren't advancing unopposed. Human Special Forces units were engaging HFY patrols throughout the frontier, using tactics and weapons specifically designed to counter alien advantages. The casualty reports made for grim reading, but they also showed something that had never been seen before. HFY forces retreating, calling for reinforcements, reporting unexpected resistance. Chen's comm unit chimed softly, and General Morrison's image appeared in the air before her. "Sarah, we just received word from Sector Command. The Admiralty is authorizing Operation Payback. Every Special Forces unit in human space is being mobilized for simultaneous strikes against confirmed HFY positions." She studied the tactical display, her mind already working through the implications. "How many units are we talking about, General?" 47 teams, spread across 23 different systems. The largest coordinated special operations mission in human history. Morrison's expression was grim. "The politicians think it's time to send a message. Show the HFY that humanity isn't going down without a fight." "And what do you think, sir?" Morrison was quiet for a long moment, his weathered features reflecting the weight of command decisions that could determine the fate of humanity itself. "I think we're about to find out whether the Devil Dogs can teach an old enemy some new tricks." Outside Chen's viewport, the stars wheeled slowly in their eternal dance, indifferent to the struggles of the species that had claimed them as their birthright. Somewhere out there, in the cold dark between worlds, HFY fleets were moving with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. They believed they understood humanity, soft, weak, fragile creatures who could be broken by superior force and advanced technology. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Chen closed her eyes and tried to push away the images of New Shanghai Colony, the memory of 12,000 lives snuffed out in a matter of hours. The anger was still there, burning like a coal in her chest, but she had learned long ago to channel that fury into something useful, something deadly. Tomorrow, Operation Payback would begin. Tomorrow, humanity's special forces would strike back at an enemy that had dismissed them as prey. Tomorrow, the HFY would discover that apex predators weren't the only species capable of hunting with perfect coordination and ruthless efficiency. Tonight, she would remember the faces of the dead and prepare for the battle that would determine whether humanity had a future among the stars, or whether they would become just another extinct species in the HFY's long history of conquest. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, humanity was ready to fight it on their own terms. The operations room aboard the UES Defiance hummed with barely controlled tension as representatives from 47 Special Forces units synchronized their mission parameters through quantum-encrypted channels. Lieutenant Colonel Chun stood before the main tactical display, watching as green dots representing human forces moved into position across a volume of space that encompassed nearly a quarter of the galaxy's spiral arm. "Ghost Team is in position at Arcturus Station," reported Captain Williams from his concealed position near the outer rim. His voice crackled through the communications array with the distinctive distortion of long-range quantum transmission. HFY garrison consists of approximately 200 warriors, standard defensive configuration. Reaper Squad confirms target lock on the supply depot at Wolf 359, came another voice, this one belonging to Major Santos, a veteran of the Martian campaigns whose units specialized in demolitions and sabotage. Enemy logistics hub is operating at full capacity. Multiple high-value targets identified. Chen studied the readouts streaming across her command interface. Operation Payback was the most ambitious military undertaking in human history, requiring perfect coordination across interstellar distances and split-second timing that would make or break humanity's chances of survival. The plan was elegantly simple in concept and nightmarishly complex in execution. Simultaneous strikes against every major HFY position in human space, designed to cripple their ability to coordinate a response. General Morrison appeared at her side, his weathered features illuminated by the ghostly blue light of the holographic displays. "Final status report from all units? 47 teams, all in position," Chen replied. "Total enemy forces estimated at 15,000 warriors across 23 systems. We're looking at odds of roughly 50 to 1. Those are the kind of odds that make politicians nervous," Morrison observed with dry humor. "Good thing we're not politicians." The generals just brought a brief smile to Chen's face, but her attention was already focused on the complex web of tactical data flowing through the command center. Each Special Forces unit had been assigned targets based on their particular specializations, and the specific vulnerabilities of their assigned objectives. The Ghost teams would hit command centers and communication hubs, using their expertise in stealth operations to blind SEK-TAR forces before they could coordinate a response. Reaper squads would focus on logistics and supply lines, crippling the enemy's ability to resupply their scattered garrisons. The Devil Dogs, Chen's own unit, had drawn the most dangerous assignment of all. Devil Dog Team confirms approach to Kepler 186F, she reported into her headset. Primary target is the SEK-TAR Regional Command Complex. Intelligence indicates the presence of War Commander Thekmor and his senior staff. The Kepler 186F operation was the crown jewel of Operation Payback, an assault on the largest SEK-TAR installation in human space. The planet served as the aliens' primary command and control center for their ongoing extermination campaign, housing not just military facilities, but also the strategic planning apparatus that had made their attacks so devastatingly effective. Sergeant Major Rodriguez's voice cut through the comm chatter as Chen's transport approached the planet's surface. Colonel, we're reading massive energy signatures from the surface installations. This isn't just a command post, it's a fortress. Chen peered through the viewport at the alien structure rising from Kepler 186F's rocky surface like a metallic mountain. The SEK-TAR had transformed the entire northern continent into a single vast military complex, with defensive installations that stretched beyond the horizon and energy shields that made the air itself shimmer with barely contained power. Traditional military doctrine would have required a full battle fleet and at least 50,000 troops to even consider an assault on such a target. How many Marines do we have planet-side? Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. 24, Rodriguez replied grimly. Including you and me. The mathematics were staggering. 24 human soldiers against a fortress defended by thousands of SEK-TAR warriors, protected by energy barriers that could withstand orbital bombardment, and equipped with weapons systems that could vaporize an attacking fleet. By any rational calculation, the mission was suicide. But rational calculations had never fully captured the essence of human special forces doctrine. Remember the briefing? Chun said as her transport touched down in a concealed valley 30 kilometers from the target. We're not trying to conquer this place. We just need to get inside, eliminate the command staff, and extract before reinforcements arrive. Speed and precision over brute force. The Devil Dogs moved across Kepler 186F's alien landscape like deadly shadows, their powered armor adapting to the planet's harsh environment with chameleon-like efficiency. Each soldier carried equipment that represented the pinnacle of human military technology, weapons that had been designed specifically for use against SEK-TAR physiology, sensors that could penetrate alien stealth systems, and armor that incorporated lessons learned from every previous encounter with the enemy. Private Jackson, the unit's demolition specialist, paused beside a rocky outcropping to study the fortress through advanced optical systems. Colonel, I'm reading construction materials I've never seen before. Those walls aren't just armored. There's some kind of energy-absorbing composite. Conventional explosives won't even scratch them. Good thing we don't use conventional explosives, Chen replied, checking the specialized charges that her team had developed specifically for this mission. The devices incorporated technology reverse-engineered from captured SEK-TAR equipment, designed to disrupt the molecular bonds that held alien construction materials together. They were weapons that existed only because human engineers had spent months studying every fragment of debris left behind by previous encounters. As the Devil Dogs approached the fortress perimeter, they encountered the first of many unpleasant surprises. The SEK-TAR had seeded the surrounding area with automated defense systems that operated on frequencies completely outside human sensory range. Invisible energy fields scanned constantly for intruders, while concealed weapon platforms tracked movement with mechanical precision. Corporal Martinez was the first to spot the trap. Motion detectors, 300 meters ahead. Military-grade sensor web, probably linked to automated weapons. Chun studied the tactical display on her helmet's heads-up system, watching as computer algorithms mapped the enemy detection grid in real time. The SEK-TAR had been thorough. Every approach to the fortress was covered by overlapping fields of fire that could reduce an attacking force to atoms within seconds. Torres, you're up, Chun said, nodding to the team's electronic warfare specialist. Specialist Torres had been studying SEK-TAR technology since the first encounters 18 months ago, learning to think like an alien engineer and anticipate the logical patterns that govern their defensive systems. Her equipment represented a unique fusion of human creativity and captured enemy technology, devices that could interface with alien computer systems in ways that their designers had never anticipated. Accessing their command protocols now, Torres whispered, her fingers dancing across controls that projected holographic interfaces directly into her visual field. Their security systems are incredibly sophisticated, but they're designed around SEKTAR behavioral patterns. They're not expecting us to approach from multiple vectors simultaneously while maintaining radio silence. The beauty of human special forces doctrine lay not in overwhelming firepower or technological superiority, but in the ability to think like the enemy while remaining fundamentally unpredictable. The Devil Dogs moved through the detection grid like water flowing around obstacles, exploiting gaps in coverage that existed only because SEKTAR tactical thinking followed different patterns than human military doctrine. Within the fortress itself, War Commander Thekmor stood before a holographic display that showed the current status of SEKTAR forces throughout human space. The installation around him hummed with the efficient activity of a military organization that had perfected conquest across countless worlds and numerous species. Thousands of warriors moved through the complex with the precision of clockwork, each one focused on their role in what the Dominion classified as final pacification operations. Status report on the soft flesh resistance, Thekmor commanded, his forearms manipulating controls with fluid precision. Sub-Commander Velkar approached with a measured stride that marked him as a veteran of dozens of campaigns. Our forces continue to advance according to schedule, War Commander. The latest raids have eliminated 17 more human settlements with minimal resistance. Total casualties among our forces remain negligible. Thekmor's mandibles clicked together in a sound that might have been satisfaction. The human species had proven to be remarkably persistent in their refusal to simply surrender and accept extinction, but persistence without power was merely a form of prolonged suicide. Their weapons were primitive, their tactics predictable, and their obvious physical limitations made them unsuitable for anything beyond the most basic forms of slave labor. What of the incident at New Shanghai Colony? The War Commander asked. Have we located War Commander Vexhai? Velkar's posture shifted slightly, a subtle change that indicated discomfort among his species. Negative, War Commander. The patrol failed to report back as scheduled. Long-range sensors detected the destruction of their transport craft, but no survivors were found. Equipment failure? Unknown, War Commander. The wreckage patterns suggest hostile action, but there were no significant human military forces in that sector. Thekmor turned away from his tactical display, for glowing eyes focusing on his subordinate with an intensity that made even veteran warriors uncomfortable. The loss of the patrol was unusual, but not unprecedented. Space was vast and dangerous, filled with hazards that could destroy even advanced technology. But the loss of War Commander Vexhai was different. Vexhai was one of the Dominion's most experienced field commanders, a warrior who had personally overseen the conquest of 17 different species. He did not simply disappear. Increase security protocols for all forward positions, Thekmor ordered. If the soft flesh have somehow acquired new weapons or tactics, we must be prepared to adapt our approach accordingly. As if summoned by his words, the fortress's alarm systems suddenly erupted into cacophonous life. Warning lights bathed the command center in pulsing red illumination, while automated voices announced breach alerts in the complex harmonics of SEKTAR language. Report. Thekmor barked, his warrior instincts taking over as he moved toward the tactical station. Multiple perimeter breaches, Sub-Commander Velkar called out, his hands moving frantically across alien control surfaces. Intruders detected in sectors 7, 12, and 19. Automated defenses are engaging, but this is impossible. What is impossible? The intruders are moving through our security systems as if they don't exist. Our sensors detect them intermittently, but they appear to be exploiting gaps in our coverage that should not exist. On the tactical display, red indicators showed the progress of intruders who moved through the fortress like ghosts, appearing and disappearing in patterns that defied conventional military doctrine. They advanced not as a concentrated force that could be engaged and destroyed, but as individual elements that struck without warning and vanished before defenders could respond. Private Jackson's first target was the fortress's primary power distribution center, a facility that channeled energy from massive fusion reactors to every system throughout the complex. The chamber was defended by automated weapons platforms and energy barriers that could vaporize an attacking force in milliseconds, but Jackson had spent months studying SEKTAR engineering principles, and he understood something that their designers had never considered. The aliens built their technology around concepts of overwhelming superiority and direct confrontation. Their defense systems were designed to stop frontal assaults by conventional military forces, not infiltration by individuals who thought like saboteurs rather than warriors. Jackson's charges were placed not on the heavily defended main power conduits, but on secondary systems that the SEKTAR had deemed too insignificant to warrant serious protection. The explosion that followed was small by military standards, barely enough to damage a human installation of comparable size. But Jackson had chosen his targets with surgical precision, creating cascading failures that propagated through the fortress's power grid like a virus spreading through an organism. Within minutes, entire sections of the complex were operating on emergency power, their defensive systems reduced to a fraction of normal capacity. Sergeant Major Rodriguez led a 4 Marine team toward the installation's communication center, moving through corridors that had been plunged into emergency lighting by Jackson's sabotage. The SEKTAR were responding with the efficiency that marked a professional military organization, but their response protocols had been designed around threats they understood. "Contact front," Rodriguez whispered into his comm as his team encountered a patrol of alien warriors moving through the darkened corridors. 8 hostiles, standard combat formation. The engagement that followed lasted less than 30 seconds, but it demonstrated the evolution of human small unit tactics in ways that would have shocked military observers. Rodriguez's team didn't attempt to match the SEKTAR's superior firepower or physical capabilities. Instead, they used the aliens' own tactical doctrine against them. SEKTAR warriors advanced in formation because their combat philosophy emphasized mutual support and coordinated firepower. But formations required clear fields of fire and predictable movement patterns, and the Devil Dogs had been training for months to exploit exactly those vulnerabilities. They moved through the fortress like a pack of hunting animals, using the environment itself as a weapon and striking from directions that SEKTAR tactical doctrine deemed impossible. When the shooting stopped, 8 alien warriors laid dead in the corridor, their sophisticated energy weapons useless against enemies who had refused to fight according to established conventions. "Communications hub is in sight," Rodriguez reported as his team approached their primary objective. Heavy security, but their defensive positions are designed around preventing entry, not dealing with opponents who are already inside. The communication center was the nerve center of SEKTAR operations throughout human space, a facility that coordinated the movements of hundreds of ships and thousands of warriors across dozens of star systems. Destroying it wouldn't end the war, but it would blind the enemy at a crucial moment and buy humanity precious time to implement the next phase of their counteroffensive. Specialist Torres connected her equipment to alien computer systems with an efficiency that spoke of countless hours of preparation. The SEKTAR had encrypted their communications with algorithms that would have taken human computers centuries to break through conventional means, but Torres wasn't using conventional means. Her equipment incorporated quantum processing elements that had been reverse engineered from captured alien technology, systems that could think like SEKTAR computers while operating according to human logical patterns. "I'm in their command network," Torres whispered as data streams flowed across her displays in patterns that resembled alien writing. "Downloading fleet positions, operational protocols, strategic assessments. Their entire military database is wide open." But even as Torres worked to extract intelligence that could reshape humanity's understanding of the war, War Commander Thekmore was moving through the fortress with a force of elite guards, hunting for the intruders who had penetrated the most secure installation in SEKTAR space. "They are here," he said, his voice carrying the certainty of a predator who had finally located his prey. "Somewhere in this installation are the soft-flesh warriors responsible for our recent losses. Find them. Kill them. Bring me proof that these creatures can die like any other inferior species." Lieutenant Colonel Chun monitored the progress of her teams through tactical displays that showed the fortress complex in 3-dimensional detail. Jackson's sabotage had succeeded beyond expectations, crippling the installation's defensive systems and creating opportunities for her other teams to advance toward their objectives. Rodriguez was minutes away from the communications center, while her third team was approaching the command complex where Thekmor and his senior staff were located. But Chen also saw the SEK-TAR response taking shape. Elite warrior units were converging on her team's positions with the precision of a military organization that had perfected urban combat across hundreds of conquered worlds. Her Marines were outnumbered by more than 100 to 1, and their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. All teams, this is Devil Dog Actual, she broadcast on their encrypted channel. Primary objectives are within reach, but we need to accelerate the timeline. Complete your missions and move to extraction points immediately. Chen's own objective was the most dangerous of all, the assassination of War Commander Thekmor himself. Intelligence indicated that the alien commander was personally responsible for planning the attacks that had killed hundreds of thousands of human civilians across dozens of colonies. His death wouldn't end the war, but it would eliminate the strategic mind that had made SEK-TAR operations so devastatingly effective. She moved through the fortress's central complex like a deadly shadow, using routes that had been mapped through months of intelligence gathering and reconnaissance. The Devil Dogs had studied this installation with an obsession that bordered on fanaticism, learning every corridor, every defensive position, every pattern of guard rotation that governed its operations. When she finally located Thekmor, the War Commander was standing in the facility's primary command center, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the tactical situation throughout human space. His four arms moved with fluid precision as he coordinated the response to the human infiltration, and Chun could see the strategic brilliance that had made him one of the Dominion's most effective leaders. War Commander Thekmor, she said, stepping out of concealment with her rifle trained on his center mass. By the authority of the United Earth Forces, I place you under arrest for war crimes against humanity. The alien turned slowly, his four glowing eyes focusing on the human soldier who had somehow penetrated the most secure installation in SEK-TAR space. For a moment, he said nothing, studying Chun with the calculating gaze of a predator encountering something outside his previous experience. Remarkable, he said finally, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and contempt. You have achieved something that should be impossible, soft flesh. You have brought your primitive weapons into the heart of our most secure installation. Chen's finger rested lightly on her rifle's trigger, but she didn't fire immediately. The mission parameters called for the capture of high-value targets when possible, and Thekmor represented an intelligence opportunity that could prove invaluable to the war effort. Your forces are finished on this world, she told him. My teams have destroyed your communications array, crippled your power systems, and eliminated your security forces. Surrender now, and you'll be treated according to the articles of interstellar warfare. Thekmor's mandibles clicked together in the sound that served as alien laughter. You speak of articles and treaties as if they apply to the relationship between apex predators and prey animals. You have won a single engagement, destroyed a single installation. Do you believe this somehow changes the fundamental nature of this war? Maybe not, Chen admitted, but it proves something important. It proves that you can be beaten. The War Commander's response was interrupted by the arrival of Rodriguez's team, their mission at the communications center complete. Through her helmet's displays, Chun could see confirmation signals from teams throughout the fortress. Primary objectives achieved, enemy resistance neutralized, extraction routes secured. Time to go, Colonel, Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the urgency of a soldier who understood that their window of opportunity was measured in minutes rather than hours. Chun looked down at War Commander Thekmor, weighing the value of capture against the risks of extraction. The alien was wounded, but not dead, his sophisticated carapace cracked, but still functional. Taking him alive would provide intelligence that could save thousands of human lives, but it would also slow their extraction and increase the chances of capture or death for her entire team. You cannot escape, Thekmor said, reading the calculation in her eyes. Even if you somehow reach your transport, our orbital defenses will destroy you before you can leave the planet's atmosphere. We'll see about that. The extraction from the SEK-TAR fortress was a masterpiece of military precision under impossible conditions. Chen's teams moved through the installation like ghosts, using the damage they had inflicted to create confusion and misdirection that allowed them to reach their extraction point despite overwhelming enemy numbers. But as their transport lifted off from Kepler 186F surface, the Devil Dogs faced their greatest challenge yet. The planet's orbital defense platforms were still fully operational, armed with weapons that could vaporize their small craft before they could reach the safety of the jump point. Multiple contacts launching from the surface reported their pilot, a veteran of the Jupiter Wars whose hands were steady despite the impossible odds they faced. HFY interceptors, closing fast. They'll be in weapons range in 90 seconds. Chen studied the tactical display, watching as alien fighters moved to cut off their escape route. The mathematics were simple and unforgiving. Their transport was fast, but lightly armed, no match for dedicated military craft operated by pilots who had been training for combat since before humanity had reached the stars. Colonel, Torres called from her position at the transport's communication console. I'm still connected to their command network. The communications hub I infiltrated is still sending data to our ships in orbit. Chen's eyes widened as she realized the implications. The intelligence Torres had gathered wasn't just tactical information. It was a complete map of HFY operations throughout human space, including fleet positions, supply routes, and strategic plans that went months into the future. How much did you get? Everything, Torres replied with quiet satisfaction. Fleet dispositions, operational protocols, strategic assessments. Their entire military database. The transport shuddered as HFY fighters opened fire, energy beams missing their target by mere meters. But even as alien weapons reached out to destroy them, Chun felt a cold smile spread across her face. Operation Payback had achieved something far greater than tactical victory. It had provided humanity with the intelligence needed to turn the entire war around. Through the viewport, she could see the stars wheeling past as their pilot pushed the transport's engines beyond safe limits. Behind them, Kepler 186F was a dwindling point of light marked by the fires of a burning fortress. And throughout human space, 46 other Special Forces teams were completing their own impossible missions, striking at an enemy that had never imagined they could be hurt by creatures they dismissed as soft flesh. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, humanity was fighting back with weapons that the HFY couldn't counter: desperation, ingenuity, and the refusal to go quietly into extinction. The war room aboard Earth's Luna Command had been transformed into something that resembled the nervous system of a vast organism, with holographic displays showing real-time data from across human space. Admiral Catherine Hayes stood at the center of it all, her gray eyes fixed on information that would have seemed impossible just 72 hours earlier. "Confirm those fleet positions again," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded humanity's naval forces through 3 different interstellar conflicts. General Morrison's image flickered in the air before her, transmitted from the U.S. Defiance through quantum relays that spanned dozens of star systems. "Confirmed, Admiral. Operation Payback has provided us with complete intelligence on HFY military dispositions throughout our sector. We know where every major fleet element is positioned, their patrol schedules, supply routes, and strategic objectives." Hayes studied the tactical display with the calculating gaze of a predator who had suddenly discovered that her prey was far more vulnerable than previously believed. The information gathered by Special Forces teams during their coordinated strikes represented the most complete intelligence breakthrough in military history. A complete map of enemy operations that revealed weaknesses and opportunities that no human strategist had dared imagine. "Analysis from the Intelligence Division?" she asked. Dr. Elizabeth Kumar, Earth's leading expert on xenological warfare, stepped forward with data tablets that contained assessments from dozens of different military and scientific disciplines. The HFY Dominion operates on principles of absolute technological superiority and overwhelming force concentration. Their tactical doctrine assumes that no enemy can match their capabilities in direct engagement, so they've dispersed their forces across vast areas to maximize territorial control rather than defensive strength. Hayes nodded slowly, her mind already working through the implications. They've spread themselves thin because they never expected effective resistance. Exactly. Our analysis indicates that while their total military strength far exceeds humanity's conventional forces, their actual defensive capability at any given position is surprisingly limited. They're configured for conquest and occupation, not for fighting a guerrilla war against opponents who refuse to engage them on their terms. The Admiral turned to the massive holographic display that dominated the center of the war room, watching as computer algorithms translated raw intelligence into tactical assessments and strategic recommendations. The picture that emerged was both encouraging and terrifying. Encouraging because it revealed opportunities that could potentially shift the balance of the war. Terrifying because those opportunities required humanity to attempt military operations on a scale that had never been tried before. "Show me the Proxima Sector analysis," Hayes ordered. The display shifted to focus on humanity's nearest colonial region, where 12 inhabited worlds supported nearly 50 million civilians. The SEK-TAR had established a major forward operating base on Proxima Centauri b, using it as a staging area for attacks throughout the sector. Intelligence indicated the presence of 3 battle fleets and approximately 30,000 warriors, making it one of the largest enemy concentrations in human space. Traditional military doctrine would require at least 1 million troops and complete space superiority to assault a target of this size, Dr. Kumar observed. The casualty projections for a conventional attack would be catastrophic. "Good thing we're not planning a conventional attack," Hayes replied. The strategy that emerged from 48 hours of intensive planning represented a fundamental evolution in human military thinking. Rather than attempting to match SEK-TAR technological superiority or numerical strength, humanity would leverage the intelligence gathered during Operation Payback to strike at the conceptual foundations of alien military doctrine. Lieutenant Colonel Chun stood before a briefing room filled with representatives from every major special forces unit in human space. The officers present represented the finest military talent that humanity could field, men and women who had proven their ability to achieve impossible objectives under conditions that would break conventional forces. Operation Nemesis will be the largest coordinated military action in human history. Chun began, her voice carrying the weight of someone who understood exactly what they were asking of their soldiers. "We're not just talking about simultaneous strikes anymore. We're talking about a coordinated campaign designed to systematically dismantle SEK-TAR military capability throughout human space." The tactical displays around the briefing room showed target areas across dozens of star systems, each one marked with symbols that indicated different types of military objectives. Fleet concentrations, supply depots, communication hubs, command centers. Every critical node in the SEK-TAR military network had been identified and assigned to specialized teams with the equipment and training necessary to neutralize their specific targets. "The intelligence we gathered during Payback has given us something unprecedented," Chun continued. "Complete situational awareness of enemy operations. We know where they are, where they're going, and what they're planning to do. For the first time since this war began, we're fighting with perfect intelligence against an enemy who thinks they're still invisible." Major Santos raised his hand, his scarred features reflecting years of combat experience in the most dangerous theaters of human space. "Colonel, the scale of this operation is staggering. We're talking about coordinating actions across light years of space with split-second timing. One mistake, one unit that fails to achieve its objectives, and the entire operation could collapse." "That's correct," Chin acknowledged. "But consider the alternative. The SEK-TAR are planning what they call final pacification, the systematic extermination of every human settlement outside the Sol system. Intelligence indicates they intend to begin the operation within the next 6 months. We either stop them now, while we still have the element of surprise, or we wait for them to come to us with the full weight of their military power." The room fell silent as the officers contemplated the magnitude of what they were being asked to attempt. Operation Nemesis would require perfect execution by hundreds of different teams operating under impossible conditions, facing an enemy that had never been defeated in open warfare. The margin for error was non-existent. The consequences of failure were extinction, and the odds of success were almost impossible to calculate. But as Chin looked around the room, she saw not fear or hesitation, but the quiet determination that marked humanity's finest soldiers. These were men and women who had volunteered to stand between their species and extinction, who had chosen to fight impossible odds because the alternative was surrender. "I won't lie to you," she said finally. "This operation will cost us. A lot of good soldiers are going to die in the next 72 hours. But if we succeed, if we can pull this off, we'll have bought humanity something that no amount of conventional military strength could achieve. We'll have bought ourselves time. Captain Rodriguez spoke up from the back of the room, his voice carrying the practical concerns of a soldier who would be leading troops into combat. Time for what, Colonel? Time to become something the HFY have never encountered before, Chen replied. Time to stop being victims and start being predators. On Proxima Centauri B, War Commander Loktar received the latest intelligence reports with growing unease. The attacks during the previous 72 hours had been more than tactical inconveniences. They represented a fundamental shift in human military capability that challenged everything the Dominion believed about inferior species. Status report on the damaged installations. He ordered his forearms manipulating controls with mechanical precision. Subcommander Veltai approached with a measured stride that marked a veteran of dozens of campaigns. But Loktar could see tension in his subordinate's posture that spoke of deeper concerns. 17 facilities have been restored to partial operational status, War Commander. However, the attacks have forced us to implement security protocols that significantly reduce operational efficiency. Loktar studied the tactical displays that showed HFY positions throughout the sector. Where once their installations had operated with the confidence of an occupying force that faced no meaningful opposition, they now resembled fortress complexes designed to withstand siege conditions. Guard rotations have been doubled, patrol frequencies increased, and defensive systems activated at levels that consumed enormous amounts of energy and personnel. What of our intelligence regarding human military capabilities? The War Commander asked. Our analysis remains incomplete, Veltai admitted, his mandibles clicking together in a sound that indicated discomfort. The humans who conducted these attacks employed tactics and equipment that do not appear in any of our previous combat assessments. They demonstrate capabilities that should be impossible given our understanding of their technological limitations. Loktar turned away from his displays, for glowing eyes focusing on his subordinate with an intensity that made even veteran warriors uncomfortable. Impossible how? They penetrated our most secure installations without triggering detection systems that should have identified them at ranges measured in kilometers. They neutralized defensive positions that were designed to withstand assault by conventional military forces. And they extracted personnel and intelligence from facilities that were considered absolutely secure. The War Commander was quiet for a long moment, his tactical mind working through implications that challenged the fundamental assumptions of HFY military doctrine. The Dominion had conquered 17 different species across the galaxy, each engagement following predictable patterns that validated their understanding of technological and evolutionary superiority. Inferior species possessed limited military capability, primitive weapons, and tactical thinking that reflected their inherent genetic limitations. But the recent human attacks suggested something that Dominion strategic thinking had never seriously considered: the possibility that inferior species might develop military capabilities that operated outside conventional parameters. Recommend immediate reinforcement of all forward positions, Loktar ordered. I want every major installation defended by at least 3 times current garrison strength. Implement continuous patrol sweeps throughout our operational area. And activate deep space sensor networks to provide early warning of human fleet movements. What the War Commander didn't know was that his defensive preparations were being monitored in real time by human intelligence assets that had been positioned throughout HFY space during Operation Payback. Torres and her team had established quantum communication links that allowed Earth's military planners to observe enemy responses as they developed, providing tactical intelligence that was updated minute by minute. Admiral Hayes watched the enemy reaction unfold across her holographic displays with the satisfaction of a hunter who had successfully driven prey toward waiting traps. The HFY were responding exactly as human psychological assessments had predicted they would, with increased defensive measures that concentrated their forces at fixed positions and reduced their operational flexibility. They're consolidating their scattered garrisons into heavily defended strongpoints, reported General Morrison from his position aboard the Defiance. Exactly what our models said they would do when faced with asymmetric threats they don't understand. Hayes nodded, her strategic mind already focused on the next phase of Operation Nemesis, which means they're abandoning the distributed deployment pattern that made them so effective during their initial attacks. They're giving us fixed targets that we can plan against. The preparations for Nemesis required 3 weeks of intensive coordination across dozens of star systems. Every Special Forces unit in human space received new equipment that incorporated lessons learned from previous encounters with SEKTAR technology. Weapons that could penetrate alien armor, sensors that could detect their stealth systems, and communication devices that operated on frequencies outside their detection range. But, more importantly, each team received detailed intelligence about their specific targets, architectural plans, security protocols, garrison strength, and tactical assessments that had been gathered through months of careful reconnaissance. For the first time in the war, human forces would enter combat with perfect knowledge of enemy positions and capabilities. Chin's Devil Dogs had drawn the most dangerous assignment of the operation, a direct assault on the Proxima Centauri B Command Complex. The installation housed not just War Commander Loktar and his senior staff, but also the central coordination facilities that managed SEKTAR operations throughout the sector. Its destruction would blind enemy forces at the crucial moment when other teams struck targets throughout the region. Final equipment check. Chen ordered as her transport approached the planet's outer atmosphere. Around her, 24 Marines performed the ritual inspections that marked professional soldiers preparing for combat. Each piece of equipment was examined, tested, and verified according to procedures that had been refined through years of combat experience. Sergeant Major Rodriguez looked up from his weapon maintenance, his weathered features reflecting the calm determination that marked veteran soldiers. Colonel, intelligence reports indicate that they've tripled their security since our last visit. We're looking at least 600 defenders in hardened positions. Good, Chen replied, checking the seals on her powered armor one final time. If they're concentrated in defensive positions, they can't be out patrolling the areas we need to move through. The insertion was planned for maximum psychological impact, as well as tactical advantage. Rather than attempting stealth infiltration, the Devil Dogs would announce their presence with a demonstration of human military capability that would shatter SEKTAR assumptions about inferior species. Their transport would approach the target at maximum velocity, deploying the team through atmospheric insertion techniques that push the boundaries of human technology. 60 seconds to drop, called the pilot, his voice steady despite the fact that they were approaching a planetary defense system that could vaporize their craft with weapons that humanity had never fully understood. Chen stood at the transport's rear hatch, watching as Proxima Centauri B's surface rushed toward them through the thin atmosphere. The planet's northern continent was dominated by the SEKTAR installation, a sprawling complex of alien architecture that covered hundreds of square kilometers with facilities whose purpose human intelligence could only guess at. 30 seconds. Around her, the Devil Dogs moved with the fluid precision that marked elite troops preparing for insertion into hostile territory. Each Marine carried equipment that represented the pinnacle of human military technology, weapons, and sensors that had been designed specifically for warfare against technologically superior opponents. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, mark. The transport's hatch irised open, exposing the interior to the planet's atmosphere as 24 human soldiers stepped into empty space 12 kilometers above the most heavily defended enemy installation in their sector. They fell through the thin air like deadly angels, their powered armor adapting to atmospheric conditions while sophisticated navigation systems guided them toward landing zones that had been selected through months of careful planning. The SEKTAR detected their approach within seconds of insertion, but the aliens' response revealed the fundamental weakness in their defensive thinking. They assumed that any attacking force would attempt to avoid their defensive systems, approaching through stealth or misdirection. They were not prepared for enemies who announced their presence by falling out of the sky in broad daylight. War Commander Loktar watched the tactical displays with growing alarm as human soldiers descended toward his installation like falling stars. The impossibility of what he was seeing challenged everything he understood about inferior species and their military limitations. No rational opponent would attempt a direct assault on a target defended by hundreds of warriors and automated weapon systems that could kill thousands. "Open fire," he ordered, his voice carrying across the command center with an urgency that his subordinates had never heard before. The installation's defensive systems erupted into thunderous life, filling the sky with energy beams and projectiles that should have destroyed the attacking force within seconds. But the humans fell through the defensive fire with movements that seemed to anticipate each weapon's targeting solution, their powered armor deflecting or absorbing hits that should have been instantly fatal. Private Jackson hit the ground running, his impact systems absorbing the kinetic energy of a 12-kilometer fall and translating it into forward momentum that carried him toward his first objective at inhuman speed. His target was the installation's primary shield generator, a facility that protected the command complex from orbital bombardment and made it impossible for human fleet units to provide fire support. The generator was defended by automated weapons platforms and energy barriers that could stop conventional military assault, but Jackson had studied HFY engineering principles for months, and he understood something that their designers had never considered. The aliens built their technology around concepts of overwhelming defensive strength that could stop any conceivable attack through brute force. They had never encountered enemies who specialized in finding ways around brute force. Jackson's demolition charges were placed with surgical precision on secondary systems that the HFY had deemed too insignificant to warrant serious protection. The explosions that followed were small by military standards, but they created cascading failures that propagated through the shield generator's control systems like a virus spreading through an organism. Within minutes, the energy barriers that protected the installation flickered and died, leaving the command complex vulnerable for the first time since its construction. Across the facility, similar scenes played out as human special forces teams struck at targets that had been selected through careful analysis of HFY engineering principles and tactical doctrine. Communication hubs fell to electronic warfare specialists who could think like alien computers while operating according to human logic. Weapon emplacements were neutralized by demolition teams who understood that the most sophisticated defensive system was only as strong as its weakest component. But it was Rodriguez and his assault team who achieved the most psychologically devastating victory. Their target was the installation's central barracks, where hundreds of HFY warriors maintained the garrison that made the facility seem impregnable. The building was a fortress within a fortress, designed to shelter defenders from any conceivable attack, while allowing them to deploy rapidly to threatened areas. Rodriguez's team didn't attack the barracks itself. Instead, they struck the facility's environmental control systems, using weapons that had been developed specifically for use against alien atmospheric requirements. Within minutes, the barracks were filled with chemical compounds that were harmless to humans, but utterly toxic to HFY physiology. When the building's emergency systems vented the contaminated atmosphere, they expelled not just toxic gases, but also the confidence and psychological certainty that had made HFY warriors so effective in previous encounters. For the first time in their species' history, they faced enemies who understood their physical limitations and could exploit them with scientific precision. War Commander Lokhtar stood in his command center, watching as a supposedly impregnable installation was systematically dismantled by 24 human soldiers. The tactical displays showed disaster unfolding at every critical point. Shield generators destroyed, communications severed, defensive positions neutralized, and garrison forces disabled by weapons that turned their own atmospheric requirements against them. How many attackers? He demanded, his 4 arms working frantically at control interfaces that no longer responded to his commands. Scans indicate approximately 24 individuals, Subcommander Veltai replied, his voice carrying the disbelief of a professional soldier watching the impossible unfold before his eyes. 24. Lokhtar's mandibles clicked together in rhythms that indicated profound confusion. Our garrison consists of 600 warriors. Our defensive systems were designed to stop assault forces numbering in the thousands. How can 24 soft-flesh creatures accomplish this? The answer came not through tactical analysis or strategic assessment, but through the simple recognition that the HFY had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the conflict they were fighting. They had assumed that superior technology and numerical advantage would guarantee victory against any inferior species, but they had never considered the possibility that their enemies might refuse to fight according to conventional parameters. Chen's final objective was the command center itself, where War Commander Lokhtar coordinated HFY operations throughout the sector. The facility was protected by energy barriers, automated weapons, and elite guards who represented the finest warriors that the Dominion could field. By any rational calculation, a direct assault on such a target would be suicide. But Chen had long ago stopped thinking in terms of rational calculations. She approached the command center not as a military target to be conquered through superior firepower, but as an engineering problem to be solved through careful analysis and creative thinking. The building's defenses were designed around the assumption that attackers would attempt to breach the main entrance or blast through reinforced walls. They were not configured to stop enemies who thought like saboteurs rather than soldiers. Chen's route into the command center took her through maintenance tunnels that the SEK-TAR had deemed too small and insignificant to warrant serious security measures. She moved through the installation's infrastructure like a virus spreading through an organism, exploiting gaps in coverage that existed only because alien defensive thinking followed different patterns than human infiltration doctrine. When she finally emerged in the command center itself, War Commander Loktar was still trying to coordinate a response to attacks that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. War Commander Loktar, Chun said, stepping out of concealment with her rifle trained on the alien center mass. I am Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chun of the United Earth Forces. I'm here to discuss terms. The war commander turned slowly, his four glowing eyes focusing on the human soldier who had somehow penetrated the most secure room in his installation. For a moment that stretched toward eternity, the two warriors studied each other across the gap that separated predator from prey, superior species from inferior, conqueror from conquered. You, Loktar said finally, his voice carrying a mixture of recognition and disbelief. You are the soft flesh who captured War Commander Vexhai. That's right. And now I'm here to capture you. The alien's mandibles clicked together in the sound that served as laughter among his species. You believe you have one, don't you? You think that because you have penetrated this single installation, because you have demonstrated some small tactical capability, that you have somehow changed the fundamental nature of this war. Chen's rifle remained steady, trained on the center of mass that represented the most effective target on SEK-TAR physiology. Maybe not, but it proves something important. It proves that apex predators can become prey under the right circumstances. Outside the command center, the sounds of combat were dying away as the last pockets of SEK-TAR resistance were neutralized by human forces that moved through the installation like ghosts. Rodriguez's voice crackled through Chen's comm system with the calm professionalism of a veteran soldier completing his mission. All objectives secured, Colonel. Facility is under our control. Chun smiled, though the expression held no warmth whatsoever. Copy that, Sergeant Major. Prepare for extraction. But even as she spoke, Chen's tactical displays were showing her something that made her blood run cold. Throughout the Proxima sector, SEK-TAR forces were responding to the attack on Loktar's installation with a coordination that suggested they had learned from previous encounters with human special forces. Rather than scattering or consolidating their defenses, they were implementing countermeasures that indicated a fundamental evolution in alien tactical thinking. The war was about to enter a new phase, and for the first time since Operation Payback began, Chen wasn't certain that humanity would survive it. The emergency session of the SEK-TAR High Command convened in the shadow of unprecedented military disaster. Supreme War Leader HFY stood before holographic displays that showed the catastrophic scope of human special forces operations across 17 different star systems, his forearms manipulating controls with a mechanical precision that marked his species' response to crisis situations. Report status on our forward installations, he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a warrior who had overseen the conquest of entire species. War Commander Zaltaith approached with tactical displays that painted a picture of military devastation unlike anything in Dominion history. 73 installations have suffered significant damage or complete destruction. Our operational capability in the outer sectors has been reduced by approximately 60%. Estimated casualties exceed 15,000 warriors. The numbers were staggering, but what truly alarmed the High Command was not the scale of the losses, but their systematic nature. Human forces had struck simultaneously across impossible distances with coordination that suggested intelligence capabilities far beyond anything the SEK-TAR had previously attributed to inferior species. Analysis of human tactical methods? HFY demanded. They demonstrate capabilities that should not exist, Zaltaith replied, his mandibles clicking together in patterns that indicated deep uncertainty. Their forces penetrate our most secure installations without triggering detection systems. They neutralize defensive positions designed to withstand conventional assault. and they extract intelligence from facilities that were considered absolutely secure. Supreme War Leader HFY studied the tactical data with growing comprehension. The human attacks represented more than tactical victories. They indicated a fundamental shift in the strategic balance that challenged everything the Dominion believed about technological superiority and species hierarchy. "They have been studying us," he said finally, "learning our methods, analyzing our technology, adapting their tactics to exploit vulnerabilities we did not know existed." "Impossible," protested War Commander Nelhaz, whose forces had suffered devastating losses during the most recent attacks. The soft flesh lacked the intellectual capacity for such complex strategic thinking. Their brains are too small, their lifespans too brief, their social organization too primitive to support sophisticated military planning. HFY turned to his subordinate with an expression that would have been recognizable to any human observer. The look of a professional soldier who had just realized that his understanding of the enemy had been fundamentally wrong. "Then, explain how 24 human soldiers destroyed an installation defended by 600 warriors and automated systems that could stop an attacking fleet." The question hung in air, like a challenge to the basic assumptions that had governed SEKTAR thinking for millions of years. The Dominion's expansion across the galaxy had been built on the certainty that superior species would always triumph over inferior ones, that technological advancement was the ultimate determinant of military success, and that primitive civilizations could never develop capabilities that threatened truly advanced cultures. But the evidence before them suggested otherwise. On Earth, Admiral Hayes stood in the Luna Command War Room, surrounded by tactical displays that showed the aftermath of Operation Nemesis with crystalline clarity. The coordinated strikes had achieved objectives that exceeded even the most optimistic planning assumptions, crippling SEKTAR military capability throughout human space, and providing intelligence that revealed the full scope of alien strategic planning. "Damage assessment from all sectors," she ordered, her gray eyes fixed on data that would determine humanity's survival chances for the months ahead. Dr. Kumar stepped forward with analysis reports that represented the collective work of hundreds of scientists, engineers, and intelligence specialists. "Preliminary estimates suggest we've destroyed approximately 40% of SEKTAR forward deployment capability. Their ability to coordinate large-scale operations has been severely compromised, and our intelligence indicates significant disruption to their supply lines." Hayes nodded slowly, but her expression remained grim. "And their response capability? That's where things get complicated," Kumar admitted. "The SEKTAR are adapting faster than our psychological models predicted. Intelligence from captured installations indicates they're implementing new security protocols, developing countermeasures for our infiltration techniques, and consolidating their remaining forces into defensive configurations that will be much harder to penetrate." The Admiral turned to General Morrison's holographic image, which flickered slightly due to the enormous distances involved in interstellar communication. "Frank, what's the assessment from your people in the field?" Morrison's weathered features reflected the concerns of a soldier who had seen the tide of battle shift countless times throughout his career. "Our teams are reporting increased resistance during extraction operations. The SEKTAR are learning from each encounter, adapting their tactics in ways that suggest they're beginning to understand our methods. We caught them off guard initially, but that advantage is fading fast." Hayes studied the strategic situation with the calculating mind of someone who had commanded naval operations across 3 different interstellar conflicts. Operation Nemesis had been a tactical triumph that demonstrated humanity's capability to strike at seemingly invulnerable targets, but it had also revealed the enemy's capacity for adaptation. The SEKTAR were not the static, predictable opponents that human planners had hoped for. They were professional military forces capable of learning from their mistakes. "Time estimate until they implement effective countermeasures?" she asked. Dr. Kumar consulted her data tablets, cross-referencing psychological assessments with tactical intelligence gathered from recent operations. "Our xenopsychology team estimates approximately 6 to 8 weeks. The SEKTAR appear to learn through systematic analysis rather than intuitive adaptation, which gives us a window of opportunity, but also means their countermeasures will be thorough and difficult to overcome once implemented." "Then, we need to make those 6 weeks count," Hayes decided. "What's the status on Operation Prometheus?" The mention of Prometheus brought a subtle shift in the war room's atmosphere, as if the very name carried implications that made even experienced military personnel uncomfortable. Where Operations Payback and Nemesis had focused on tactical strikes and intelligence gathering, Prometheus represented something far more ambitious and far more dangerous. Lieutenant Colonel Chun materialized in the holographic communication array, her image transmitted from the UES Defiance as it moved through the outer system on patrol duties designed to intercept SCKTAR reconnaissance forces. Admiral, preliminary assessments indicate that Prometheus is feasible, but the risk factors are unprecedented. Hayes nodded grimly. Explain. The intelligence we've gathered indicates that the SCKTAR maintain a central command facility in the Vega system, an installation that coordinates military operations across this entire spiral arm. It's not just a regional headquarters. It's the nerve center for their expansion into our sector of the galaxy. Chen's tactical displays showed an installation that dwarfed anything humanity had previously encountered. The Vega complex covered an entire moon, with defensive systems that could stop battle fleets and garrison forces numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Traditional military doctrine would require multiple star fleets and millions of troops to even consider an assault on such a target. The facility processes strategic planning for over 50 different species that the SCKTAR are currently engaged in conquering or exterminating, Chun continued. Destroying it wouldn't just disrupt their operations in human space. It would cripple their ability to coordinate expansion throughout this region of the galaxy. Admiral Hayes was quiet for a long moment, weighing tactical opportunity against strategic risk. Prometheus would require every Special Forces unit that humanity could field operating at maximum coordination across distances that made communication itself a logistical challenge. The operation would strip Earth's defenses of their most capable soldiers and commit them to a mission with virtually no chance of survival. But the alternative was slow extinction as the SCKTAR adapted to human tactics and resumed their systematic extermination campaign. Authorization codes? She asked finally. Prometheus requires unanimous consent from the Defense Council, the Colonial Authority, and the Special Operations Command, Chen replied. We're asking for permission to attempt something that has never been tried in military history. Then, we better make sure we get it right the first time. The authorization process for Operation Prometheus took 3 days of intensive briefings, strategic assessments, and political negotiations that spanned the entire human government structure. Representatives from Earth, the colonial worlds, and the military hierarchy gathered through holographic conferences to debate the merits of an operation that would either secure humanity's survival or guarantee their extinction. Senator Elizabeth Morrison, the general's younger sister and chairwoman of the Colonial Defense Committee, raised concerns that reflected civilian understanding of military risk. Colonel Chun, you're asking us to authorize an operation that will commit our entire Special Forces capability to a single target. What happens if Prometheus fails? What happens to Earth's defenses if we lose every elite unit we possess? Chen's response reflected the brutal mathematics of interstellar warfare. Senator, our current defensive strategy is based on the assumption that we can continue to stay ahead of SCKTAR adaptation indefinitely. Intelligence analysis indicates that assumption is false. They're learning to counter our methods faster than we could develop new ones. If we wait for them to complete their adaptation process, we won't have elite units to worry about because we'll all be dead. The debate continued for hours, but the ultimate decision was driven by intelligence reports that painted an increasingly desperate picture. SCKTAR forces throughout human space were implementing new security protocols that made infiltration operations exponentially more difficult. Their response times to human attacks were improving, their defensive coordination was becoming more sophisticated, and their strategic planning was beginning to account for asymmetric threats. The window of opportunity is closing, Dr. Kumar testified during the final session. Our psychological assessments indicate that the SCKTAR will achieve effective countermeasures within 6 weeks. After that point, our Special Forces operations will face casualty rates approaching 100% with minimal chance of achieving strategic objectives. The vote was unanimous, though Hayes could see the weight of the decision in the faces of the representatives who authorized it. Prometheus would proceed with the full backing of human civilization, carrying with it the hopes and fears of 50 billion people who understood that their species stood on the edge of extinction. Preparations for Prometheus required the most complex logistics operation in human history. Every Special Forces unit would need to be equipped, briefed, and positioned for coordinated action across distances measured in light years. The timing requirements were so precise that success or failure could depend on delays measured in minutes rather than hours. Chun stood in the briefing room of the U.S. Defiance, addressing representatives from 93 different Special Forces units through holographic communication arrays. The faces that looked back at her represented humanity's finest military talent, soldiers who had proven their ability to achieve impossible objectives under conditions that would break conventional forces. The Vega installation represents the largest military target humanity has ever attempted to assault, she began, her voice carrying the weight of someone who understood exactly what they were asking of their soldiers. We're not talking about simultaneous strikes on scattered targets. We're talking about coordinated operations against a single facility that houses more enemy forces than we've encountered in all previous operations combined. The tactical displays showed the Vega complex in three-dimensional detail, revealing an installation that seemed more like a small city than a military base. Defensive systems covered every approach. Automated weapons platforms provided overlapping fields of fire, and energy barriers created zones of destruction that could vaporize attacking forces before they could come within striking range. Intelligence indicates the presence of war leader Kethvar himself, along with the senior command staff responsible for coordinating SEKTAR operations throughout our sector. Chun continued. This isn't just about disrupting enemy operations. It's about decapitating their command structure and buying humanity the time needed to develop long-term defensive strategies. Major Santos spoke up from his position in the formation, his scarred features reflecting the practical concerns of a soldier who would be leading troops into an impossible situation. Colonel, the defensive analysis indicates we'll be facing automated systems that can engage multiple targets simultaneously across ranges measured in kilometers. How do we penetrate defenses designed to stop battle fleets? The same way we've been penetrating SEKTAR defenses since this war began, Chun replied. By refusing to fight according to their assumptions about how military operations should work. The strategy that emerged from weeks of intensive planning represented the ultimate evolution of human special forces doctrine. Rather than attempting to overwhelm SEKTAR defenses through superior firepower, Prometheus would exploit the conceptual limitations that governed alien military thinking. The SEKTAR built their defenses around assumptions of technological superiority and conventional tactical doctrine. Their automated systems were designed to engage targets that behaved like military units. Formations that maintained communication, followed predictable movement patterns, and operated according to established tactical principles. Prometheus would deploy human forces as individuals rather than units, each soldier operating independently according to mission parameters that allowed for maximum tactical flexibility. They would approach the target not as a military formation, but as a distributed network of independent agents, each one capable of adapting to local conditions without requiring coordination or communication with other elements. Insertion will be conducted through atmospheric entry at 96 different points simultaneously, Chun explained as the tactical displays showed approach vectors that covered the entire moon. Each soldier will carry mission parameters for multiple objectives, allowing them to adapt their targets based on local conditions and opportunity. The briefing continued for hours, covering every aspect of an operation that pushed the boundaries of human military capability. Equipment specifications, communication protocols, extraction procedures, and contingency plans for situations that range from partial success to complete disaster. But underlying all the technical details was a simple recognition that Prometheus represented humanity's last chance to strike back before the SEKTAR completed their adaptation to human tactics. The journey to the Vega system required 2 weeks of travel through interstellar space, with human forces maintaining communication silence to avoid detection by SEKTAR long-range sensors. The ships carrying the assault teams were the fastest and most sophisticated vessels that humanity could field, but they were also woefully inadequate for the task of penetrating the defensive perimeter around an installation that had been designed to stop attacking fleets. Chin stood on the bridge of the lead transport, watching as Vega grew from a distant star to a blazing sun that dominated the forward viewports. Somewhere ahead lay the moon that housed the largest concentration of SEKTAR forces ever assembled in a single location, defended by weapons systems that could destroy worlds and garrisoned by warriors who had never known defeat. Final approach in 6 hours, reported the ship's pilot, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the target area. Whatever defensive systems they have, they're operating at maximum power. Chen nodded, her mind already focused on the final preparations for an operation that would either secure humanity's future or guarantee their extinction. Around her, the transport hummed with the quiet activity of soldiers making final equipment checks and reviewing mission parameters one last time. All units, this is Prometheus Actual, she broadcast on the encrypted command channel that connected all 93 assault teams. We are 6 hours from target. Final status check on all teams. The responses came back with the calm professionalism that marked elite military units preparing for combat. Equipment ready. Personnel briefed. Mission parameters confirmed. 93 teams of humanity's finest soldiers, each one carrying enough specialized equipment to assault targets that conventional forces couldn't even approach. But as Chun listened to the status reports, her tactical displays were showing her something that made her blood run cold. Long-range sensors were detecting SEK-TAR fleet movements throughout the Vega system. Not the scattered patrol units that intelligence had predicted, but concentrated battle groups that suggested the enemy had somehow learned about Prometheus in advance. "Colonel," came the voice of Lieutenant Torres, the electronic warfare specialist whose skills had made Operation Nemesis possible. "I'm detecting communication patterns that suggest coordinated defensive preparations. They know we're coming." Chun stared at the sensor displays, watching as SEK-TAR forces moved into positions that could only be described as a reception committee. The enemy wasn't just prepared for attack. They were prepared specifically for the kind of asymmetric assault that had made human special forces so effective in previous operations. For the first time since the war began, humanity was walking into a trap. "All teams, stand by for emergency briefing," Chun ordered, her mind racing through tactical options that grew more limited with each passing second. "We have a significant change in the tactical situation." The holographic communication arrays came alive as commanders from 93 different Special Forces units connected for an emergency conference that would determine whether Prometheus proceeded as planned or was aborted before it could begin. The faces that appeared in the display represented thousands of hours of training, millions of dollars in equipment, and the hopes of an entire species balanced on the edge of extinction. Intelligence indicates that SEK-TAR forces in the target area have implemented defensive measures specifically designed to counter human infiltration techniques, Chen reported, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had to deliver news that could doom their entire species. "They appear to have anticipated our approach vectors, our equipment capabilities, and our tactical doctrine." The silence that followed was filled with the implications of what she was saying. The SEK-TAR hadn't just learned to counter human special forces operations. They had learned to predict them. The advantage of surprise that had made operations payback and Nemesis possible was gone, replaced by the nightmare scenario of walking into prepared defenses that had been designed specifically to kill them. "Recommendation?" asked Major Santos, his voice carrying the practical concerns of a soldier who needed to make life-or-death decisions based on incomplete information. Chen looked around at the faces of soldiers who had volunteered to stand between their species and extinction, men and women who had chosen to attempt the impossible because the alternative was surrender. The mathematics were clear. Proceeding with Prometheus under current conditions would result in casualties approaching 100% with minimal chance of achieving strategic objectives. But aborting the operation would leave humanity defenseless against an enemy that was rapidly developing countermeasures for every tactic that had previously proven effective. "We proceed as planned," she said finally. "But we proceed knowing that this isn't just about completing our mission anymore. This is about proving that human beings don't go quietly into extinction." The final approach to the Vega installation began as Chen's transport entered the moon's atmosphere, followed by 92 other ships carrying soldiers who understood that they were very likely flying to their deaths. Below them lay an installation that covered an entire world, defended by weapons that could destroy fleets and garrisoned by an enemy that knew they were coming. But as the transports descended toward their insertion points, Chun felt a cold smile spread across her face. The SEK-TAR might have learned to predict human tactics and counter human equipment, but there was one thing they still didn't understand about the species they were trying to exterminate. Humanity's greatest weapon had never been superior technology or brilliant tactics. It had always been the simple refusal to give up, no matter how hopeless the situation became. All teams, this is Prometheus Actual, she broadcast as her transport approached the drop zone. Remember what we're fighting for. Remember who we're fighting for. And remember that even if we die here today, we're going to make sure they remember us. The insertion began as planned, with 93 human soldiers stepping out of their transports into the teeth of defensive systems that had been designed specifically to kill them. But as they fell toward the surface of an alien moon that had become humanity's last battleground, they carried with them something that the HFY had never encountered in their long history of conquest. They carried the fury of a species that refused to be exterminated. The atmosphere above the Vega installation erupted into hellish light as automated defense systems engaged 93 human soldiers falling through space like deadly meteors. Energy beams that could vaporize starships reached out across kilometers of sky, tracking targets that moved within human precision through defensive fire that should have been impossible to survive. Lieutenant Colonel Chun felt her powered armor absorbing impacts that would have destroyed conventional military equipment, while her helmet's displays showed tactical information that painted a picture of coordinated annihilation. Around her, soldiers were dying. She could see their life signs disappearing from her command interface one by one as HFY weapons found their marks. But she could also see something else. The defensive systems that had been designed to stop conventional military assault were struggling to track individual targets that moved according to human tactical doctrine rather than alien military thinking. The HFY had prepared for an attack, but they had prepared for the wrong kind of attack. Torres, status on enemy communication systems, Chen called out as she activated her armor's adaptive camouflage and vanished against the alien landscape. Massive interference patterns, Colonel, came to reply through combat communications that cut through electromagnetic warfare like a blade. They're jamming everything. Our frequencies, their frequencies, everything in between. They've blinded themselves to stop us from coordinating. Chen smiled grimly as she moved across terrain that seemed designed by nightmares. The HFY had implemented communication jamming to prevent human forces from coordinating their assault, but they had also crippled their own ability to coordinate defensive responses. In trying to counter human tactical flexibility, they had created exactly the kind of chaotic environment where human soldiers thrived. The first phase of Prometheus unfolded across the surface of an alien moon, like a symphony of destruction conducted by musicians who had trained for this moment their entire lives. Human Special Forces teams struck at targets that had been identified through months of intelligence gathering, using weapons and tactics that incorporated everything they had learned about HFY vulnerabilities. Private Jackson's demolition charges were placed with surgical precision on power distribution nodes that the aliens had deemed too insignificant to warrant heavy protection. The explosions that followed created cascading failures throughout the installation's energy grid, plunging vast sections of the complex into emergency lighting while defensive systems struggled to maintain operational capability. Sergeant Major Rodriguez led a 6 Marine team against the installation's communication hub, moving through alien architecture like deadly shadows while automated weapons tried to track targets that seemed to materialize from empty air. When the shooting stopped, the facility that had coordinated HFY operations across dozens of star systems lay in smoking ruins. But it was Specialist Torres who achieved the most strategically devastating victory. Her target was the installation's central computer core, a quantum processing facility that housed the strategic planning algorithms responsible for coordinating HFY military operations throughout their sector of the galaxy. The computer core was protected by energy barriers, automated defenses, and security protocols that should have made infiltration impossible. But Torres had been studying alien computer systems since the first encounters 18 months ago, learning to think like HFY programmers while operating according to human logical patterns. I'm interfacing with their strategic database now, she whispered into her comm as her equipment connected to alien systems through quantum pathways that their designers had never imagined. Downloading fleet positions, operational protocols, strategic assessments for over 50 different species. But even as Torres extracted intelligence that could reshape the entire war, she was discovering something that made her blood run cold. The HFY weren't just planning to exterminate humanity. They were planning to exterminate every species in this spiral arm of the galaxy that showed potential for technological development. Colonel, "You need to see this," she transmitted through encrypted channels as data flowed across her displays in patterns that revealed the true scope of Dominion ambitions. The information that Torres had uncovered painted a picture of systematic genocide on a scale that dwarfed anything in recorded history. Humanity was just one target in a campaign designed to eliminate dozens of species whose only crime was showing signs of evolutionary potential that might someday threaten Esikatar supremacy. Chun processed the implications as she moved toward her own objective. The command center where war leader Kefvar coordinated Dominion operations across light years of space. The facility was protected by defenses that could stop battle fleets, but Chun had long ago stopped thinking in terms of conventional military solutions. She approached the command center through maintenance tunnels that the Esikatar had deemed too small and insignificant to warrant serious security measures, moving through the installation's infrastructure like a virus spreading through an organism. When she finally emerged in the command center itself, she found herself face to face with the architect of humanity's intended extinction. Supreme War Leader Kefvar stood before holographic displays that showed the tactical situation across the installation, his four arms moving with mechanical precision as he tried to coordinate a response to attacks that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Around him, alien technicians worked frantically at control stations while automated voices announced damage reports in the complex harmonics of Esikatar language. War Leader Kefvar, Chun said, stepping out of concealment with her rifle trained on the alien commander's center mass. "I am Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chun of the United Earth Forces. You are under arrest for war crimes against humanity and conspiracy to commit genocide on a galactic scale." The Supreme War Leader turned slowly, his four glowing eyes focusing on the human soldier who had somehow penetrated the most secure facility in Esikatar space. For a moment that stretched toward eternity, the two beings studied each other across the gap that separated species, ideology, and evolutionary philosophy. "Remarkable," Kefvar said finally, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "You have achieved something that should be impossible, soft flesh. You have brought your primitive weapons into the heart of our most secure installation for the second time." "Third time, actually," Chen corrected. "We captured Vex High, we took Thekmore, and now we're here for you." The alien's mandibles clicked together in patterns that might have been laughter if laughter could be made of grinding stone and breaking glass. "You think this changes something? You think capturing individual commanders somehow alters the fundamental nature of this conflict?" Chun kept her rifle trained on the war leader while her tactical displays showed the progress of human teams throughout the installation. Objectives were being achieved with devastating efficiency. Power systems destroyed, communication networks severed, defensive positions neutralized, and strategic databases compromised. "It changes everything," she said. "You see, we've learned something important about your people during our little visits to your installations. You're not the invincible apex predators you pretend to be. You're just another species that got lucky with technology and convinced themselves that luck made them gods." Kefvar's expression shifted, revealing something that Chun had never seen in alien features before: uncertainty. "You speak as if you understand the nature of galactic civilization, as if your brief existence gives you insight into forces that have shaped the cosmos for millions of years." "Maybe not," Chun admitted, "but I understand something about predators and prey that your perfect warrior society never taught you to recognize. The relationship isn't permanent. Circumstances change. Evolution continues. And sometimes the prey develops teeth." The war leader moved toward a control console, his four arms reaching for weapons that could summon reinforcements from throughout the installation. But Chin's rifle was already tracking his movement, her finger resting lightly on a trigger that connected a round specifically designed for Esikatar physiology. "I wouldn't," she advised. "My people have gotten very good at killing things that are stronger than we are." Around them, the sounds of combat were dying away as the last pockets of Esikatar resistance were neutralized by human forces that moved through the installation like deadly ghosts. Rodriguez's voice crackled through Chin's comm system with the calm professionalism of a veteran soldier completing an impossible mission. "All primary objectives secured, Colonel. Installation is under our control." Chin smiled, though the expression held no warmth whatsoever. "Copy that, Sergeant Major. Initiate final phase protocols." The final phase of Operation Prometheus was the most audacious element of an already impossible mission. Rather than simply destroying the Vega installation, human forces would attempt to capture it intact and turn the SEK-TAR's most important facility into a weapon aimed at their own strategic planning apparatus. Torres's infiltration of the alien computer systems had provided access to communication networks that spanned the entire Dominion military structure. Through quantum relays that operated across light years of space, the installation maintained contact with SEK-TAR forces throughout the galaxy, coordinating operations that involved millions of warriors and thousands of starfleets. I can access their entire command network, Torres reported from her position at the Central Computer Core. Fleet dispositions, strategic plans, operational protocols for over 200 different military campaigns. Everything they're doing, everywhere they're doing it. Chun studied the tactical implications while keeping her rifle trained on Kethvar, who watched the proceedings with the fascinated horror of a professional soldier witnessing the impossible. Can you insert false information into their command network? More than that, Torres replied with quiet satisfaction. I can make their own computer systems work against them. Feed them false intelligence, disrupt their coordination, turn their strategic planning algorithms into weapons aimed at their own forces. The operation that followed represented the ultimate fusion of human creativity and captured alien technology. Torres and her team used the Vega installation's quantum communication arrays to insert viruses into SEK-TAR computer networks throughout the galaxy, corrupting data streams that coordinated military operations across dozens of different species. Fleet deployment orders were altered to send SEK-TAR forces to empty systems. Supply convoys were redirected away from forward positions that desperately needed reinforcement. Communication protocols were modified to create interference patterns that left isolated units unable to call for assistance. Within hours, the careful coordination that had made SEK-TAR military operations so devastatingly effective began to collapse into chaos. Status report from the outer systems. Chun ordered as her teams completed their systematic takeover of the installation. Major Sandos's voice came through the communication arrays with updates that painted a picture of strategic transformation. Ghost Team reports that SEK-TAR forces in the Tau Ceti system have abandoned their forward positions and are retreating toward their primary bases. Reaper Squad confirms that enemy supply lines in the Wolf sector have been completely disrupted. Multiple alien fleet units are reporting communication failures and requesting emergency assistance. Shin nodded, studying tactical displays that showed the ripple effects of Operation Prometheus spreading across light years of space. The systematic corruption of SEK-TAR command networks was creating a cascade of failures that propagated through their military structure like a virus spreading through an organism. But even as human forces achieved victory beyond their most optimistic projections, Chin understood that they had crossed a line from which there could be no return. By capturing and corrupting the Vega installation, they had committed an act of war that the SEK-TAR could never forgive or ignore. The Dominion would respond with everything they possessed, and humanity would face the full weight of their military power. War leader Kethvar, she said, turning back to the alien commander who had watched the systematic dismantling of his strategic apparatus with growing comprehension. I want you to send a message to your superiors. Tell them that humanity is no longer interested in being exterminated quietly. The Supreme War Leader looked around at his command center, now controlled by soldiers from a species he had dismissed as prey animals barely capable of tool use. What message would you have me send? Soft flesh. Tell them that the prey has developed teeth, Chin replied. Tell them that apex predators can become endangered species under the right circumstances. And tell them that if they want to finish what they started, they better bring everything they have. You cannot hope to stand against the full power of the Dominion, Kethvar said, but his voice carried uncertainty that hadn't been present before. We have fleets that number in the thousands, warriors that count in the millions. Your entire species could not withstand even a fraction of our true military capability. Maybe not, Chin agreed. But that's what you said about our colonies, wasn't it? Easy targets, defenseless settlements full of soft flesh creatures who couldn't possibly threaten the mighty SEK-TAR Dominion. How did that work out for you? The extraction from the Vega installation was conducted with the same precision that had marked every phase of Operation Prometheus. But Chin's teams didn't simply withdraw. They left behind a gift that would continue to corrupt SEK-TAR operations for months to come. Torres had installed quantum viruses throughout the alien computer network, programs that would continue to generate false intelligence and disrupt coordination long after human forces had departed. The installation itself remained intact, but it had been transformed into a weapon aimed at the heart of Dominion strategic planning. As Chen's transport lifted off from the alien moon's surface, she looked back at an installation that had been the nerve center of operations designed to exterminate dozens of species throughout the galaxy. Now it was humanity's first victory in a war that had seemed hopeless just months before. Admiral Hayes, this is Prometheus Actual, she transmitted through quantum relays that spanned the distance back to Earth. Mission accomplished. Package secured. Objectives achieved. Intelligence gathered. The response came back through communication arrays that carried the voices of humanity's leadership across impossible distances. Outstanding work, Sarah. Status on casualties? Chun consulted her tactical displays, studying numbers that told the story of an operation that had pushed human military capability to its absolute limits. 17 Kia, 34 wounded. Casualty rate significantly lower than projected for an operation of this scope. And enemy casualties? Difficult to estimate precisely, Admiral. Conservative assessment would be 15,000 confirmed kills, with strategic capability degraded by approximately 70%. The Vega installation is intact, but completely compromised. We own their command network now. The silence that followed carried the weight of strategic transformation. In the space of a single operation, humanity had evolved from victims fighting for survival to predators capable of striking at the heart of an enemy that had seemed invincible. But Chen also understood that the real war was just beginning. The SEK-TAR would respond to Operation Prometheus with everything they possessed, and humanity would face attacks that made their previous raids seem like minor inconveniences. Admiral, what's the status on Operation Phoenix? She asked, referring to the defensive preparations that had been implemented throughout human space while Special Forces teams conducted their assault operations. Colonial fleets are moving to defensive positions around every inhabited system, Hayes replied. We're implementing the tactical doctrine developed from captured SEK-TAR intelligence, distributed defense networks, mobile fleet elements, and hardened command structures that can continue to function even under direct assault. Chen nodded, though she understood that conventional military preparations would only delay the inevitable if the SEK-TAR committed their full strength to humanity's extinction. The Real defense would come from the strategic advantages that Operations Payback, Nemesis, and Prometheus had created: intelligence superiority, tactical flexibility, and the psychological impact of proving that supposedly invincible enemies could be beaten by soldiers who refused to accept defeat. There's something else, Admiral, Chun said, remembering the intelligence that Torres had uncovered during her infiltration of the alien computer network. The SEK-TAR aren't just planning to exterminate humanity. They're planning systematic genocide on a galactic scale, dozens of species that show potential for technological development. The implications hung in the communication channel like a challenge to everything humanity believed about their place in the galaxy. They weren't just fighting for their own survival. They were potentially fighting for the survival of every species that might someday threaten SEK-TAR supremacy. Then, we better make sure we win, Hayes replied with the grim determination of someone who understood that failure meant not just human extinction, but the death of potential civilizations that hadn't even been born yet. 6 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Defiance, watching as human patrol ships moved through the outer system in formations that would have been impossible before Operation Prometheus. The intelligence gathered from captured SEK-TAR installations had transformed humanity's understanding of interstellar warfare, providing tactical advantages that had shifted the strategic balance throughout their sector of space. The war was far from over. SEK-TAR fleets still prowled the void between stars, and their response to humanity's Special Forces operations had been swift and brutal. 3 colonies had been destroyed in retaliatory strikes, and conventional human military forces had suffered devastating casualties in direct engagements with alien battle groups. But something fundamental had changed. The SEK-TAR no longer moved through human space with the confidence of apex predators hunting helpless prey. They approached human positions with caution, implemented extensive security protocols, and maintained communication silence to prevent their networks from being compromised by an enemy they had finally learned to respect. Status report from the frontier sectors. Chen requested from the ship's communication officer. Ghost teams report successful interdiction of 3 SEK-TAR supply convoys in the last week. Reaper squads have destroyed 2 enemy communication hubs and a forward operating base. Devil Dog units have captured another war commander and extracted intelligence on planned offensive operations. Chen nodded, studying tactical displays that showed the current state of a conflict that had evolved far beyond the simple extermination campaign that the SEK-TAR had originally planned. Humanity was no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for victory, using weapons that the aliens couldn't counter and tactics that exploited every weakness in Dominion military thinking. "What's the assessment on SEK-TAR adaptation capabilities?" she asked. Dr. Kumar's voice came through the ship's communication systems with analysis that represented months of careful observation. "They're learning, but slowly. Their military doctrine is built around technological superiority and conventional tactical thinking. They're having difficulty adapting to asymmetric warfare conducted by opponents who think like guerrillas rather than soldiers. And their response to our psychological warfare operations? Significant impact on morale and operational efficiency. Intelligence indicates that SEK-TAR commanders are implementing increasingly restrictive security protocols that limit their tactical flexibility. They're starting to jump at shadows, to assume that every operation has been compromised, every communication monitored, every plan anticipated." Chun smiled, recognizing the symptoms of an enemy that had lost the psychological initiative. The SEK-TAR had entered the war believing they understood humanity's capabilities and limitations. They had expected to face a primitive species that would either surrender quickly or die slowly under the weight of superior technology. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each encounter, that learned from every defeat and turned every disadvantage into a weapon. Human special forces had evolved from desperate survivors into apex predators in their own right, hunting SEK-TAR forces with the same systematic efficiency that the aliens had once used against helpless colonies. "Colonel, incoming transmission from Earth Command," announced the communication officer. "Priority Alpha, eyes-only classification." Admiral Hayes's image materialized in the holographic display, her expression carrying the weight of strategic decisions that would determine the future of human civilization. "Sarah, we've just received confirmation from our deep space reconnaissance units. The SEK-TAR are massing a battle fleet in the Arcturus system, over 300 ships, including their largest dreadnoughts." Chun studied the intelligence reports that accompanied the transmission, analyzing fleet compositions and deployment patterns with the tactical mind that had made her one of humanity's most effective special forces commanders. "Assessment of their target? Earth itself," Hayes replied grimly. "They're planning a direct assault on the Sol system, bypassing our frontier defenses and striking at the heart of human civilization. Intelligence indicates they intend to end this war through overwhelming force applied at our most critical point." The implications were staggering. A SEK-TAR battle fleet of that size could destroy Earth's orbital defenses, devastate the planet's surface, and exterminate the 40 billion humans who call the homeworld their home. Conventional military doctrine suggested that no defensive force humanity could assemble would be sufficient to stop such an overwhelming assault. But Chen had long ago stopped thinking in terms of conventional military doctrine. "What's the timeline for their attack?" she asked. 3 weeks, possibly less. They're moving through hyperspace routes that our long-range sensors can barely track, but their trajectory is unmistakable. They're coming for Earth, and they're bringing everything they have. Chun was quiet for a moment, her mind working through tactical possibilities and strategic options that most military planners would never consider. The SEK-TAR were massing for a conventional assault that would pit their technological superiority against human defensive positions, exactly the kind of engagement that their doctrine was designed to win. "Admiral, I want to propose Operation Ragnarok," she said finally. "Explain." "The SEK-TAR are concentrating their forces for a direct assault because they believe superior numbers and technology guarantee victory. But concentration also means vulnerability. 300 ships represents the largest accumulation of enemy military assets in a single location since the war began." Hayes leaned forward, her strategic mind already beginning to comprehend the implications of what Chun was suggesting. "You're talking about a direct assault on their battle fleet. Sarah, that's suicide. Even if we committed every ship in the human navy, we couldn't match their firepower. Not with conventional tactics, Chen agreed. But what if we didn't fight them ship to ship? What if we infiltrated their fleet and turned their own weapons against them? The strategy that emerged from 2 weeks of intensive planning represented the ultimate evolution of human special forces doctrine applied to naval warfare on an interstellar scale. Rather than attempting to match SEK-TAR firepower through conventional fleet engagement, Operation Ragnarok would deploy special forces teams aboard enemy vessels to capture or destroy them from within. The plan required technology that pushed the boundaries of human engineering capability, stealth insertion craft that could penetrate SEK-TAR sensor networks, boarding equipment that could breach alien hull designs, and weapons specifically configured for use in zero-gravity combat against opponents in powered armor. The insertion phase will be the most dangerous part of the operation, Chen explained to the assembled commanders who would lead their teams into the heart of the enemy fleet. We're talking about boarding actions against 300 different vessels simultaneously, each one defended by crews that outnumber us by factors of 10 to 1 or greater. Major Santos studied the tactical projections with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent years planning operations that conventional wisdom deemed impossible. Colonel, even if we successfully board their ships, how do we prevent them from simply venting atmosphere or activating self-destruct systems? By moving faster than they can react, Chen replied. Intelligence indicates that SEK-TAR ships operate on centralized command protocols that require authorization from senior officers for major system changes. If we can neutralize their command crews quickly enough, we can lock them out of their own systems. The briefing continued for hours, covering every aspect of an operation that would either save Earth from annihilation or guarantee the extinction of humanity's most elite military forces. Boarding procedures, target priorities, extraction protocols, and contingency plans for scenarios that range from partial success to complete disaster. But underlying all the technical details was a simple recognition that Operation Ragnarok represented humanity's last chance to strike back before facing the full weight of SEK-TAR military power. The approach to the Arcturus system required navigation through hyperspace routes that skirted the boundaries of known physics, while human forces maintained complete electronic silence to avoid detection by sensors that could identify vessels across light years of space. The ships carrying Chen's assault teams were among the most sophisticated vessels humanity had ever built, but they seemed woefully inadequate for penetrating a battle fleet that could destroy worlds. Final approach in 2 hours, reported the lead pilot, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. Long-range sensors confirm fleet composition, 317 capital ships, including 12 dreadnoughts that mass more than our entire Navy combined. Chen stood in the transport's briefing area, addressing 150 Special Forces soldiers who would board SEK-TAR vessels in the largest naval special operations mission in human history. The faces that looked back at her represented decades of combat experience, millions of hours of training, and the accumulated expertise of soldiers who had proven their ability to achieve impossible objectives. Remember, this isn't about destroying their entire fleet, she said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who understood exactly what they were asking of their troops. This is about creating enough confusion and damage to force them to abort their attack on Earth. We don't have to win every engagement. We just have to convince them that the cost of victory is higher than they're willing to pay. The insertion began as planned, with human boarding craft approaching the SEK-TAR fleet like deadly viruses seeking cellular targets. Each team had been assigned specific vessel types based on their specializations. Electronics warfare units would target command ships, demolition specialists would focus on ammunition carriers, and assault teams would board the massive dreadnoughts that served as the backbone of alien fleet operations. Chen's own target was the fleet flagship, a vessel that dwarfed anything in human naval service, and housed the command staff responsible for coordinating the attack on Earth. The ship's defenses were designed to stop attacking fleets, not individual craft that approached like parasites seeking hosts. Boarding successful, she reported as her team cut through alien hull material with tools that incorporated captured SEK-TAR technology. Moving toward primary objectives. Around her, the Devil Dogs moved through corridors that had been designed for beings twice their size, using alien architecture to their advantage while sophisticated sensors mapped the ship's internal layout in real time. The vessel housed over 10,000 crew members, but Its size also meant that small teams could operate for extended periods without detection. Their first objective was the ship's communication center, a facility that coordinated fleet operations across hundreds of vessels through quantum relays that operated faster than light itself. Destroying it wouldn't cripple the fleet, but it would blind the command structure at the crucial moment when other human teams struck targets throughout the formation. "Contact front," whispered Sergeant Major Rodriguez as his point team encountered a patrol of Escatar warriors moving through the ship's central corridor. 12 hostiles, standard configuration. The engagement that followed lasted less than a minute, but it demonstrated how completely human tactics had evolved since the war's beginning. Rodriguez's team didn't attempt to match alien firepower or physical capabilities. Instead, they used the ship's own environment as a weapon, creating atmospheric breaches that forced the Escatar to fight in conditions that favored human mobility and tactical flexibility. When the shooting stopped, 12 alien warriors lay dead in the corridor, their sophisticated energy weapons useless against enemies who had learned to turn superior technology into a liability rather than an advantage. Communications hub secured. Torres reported from her position at the alien control systems, uploading virus packages into their command network now. But even as Torres worked to corrupt Escatar fleet communications, Chen was moving toward her own objective, the bridge where Fleet Commander Theknos coordinated the largest naval operation in Dominion history. The facility was protected by energy barriers and automated defenses that should have made infiltration impossible. But Chen had learned to think like an alien engineer while operating according to human tactical principles. When she finally entered the bridge itself, she found herself in a cathedral-like space filled with holographic displays that showed the tactical situation across hundreds of light years. Escatar officers worked at control stations while automated voices provided updates on fleet status and operational parameters. At the center of it all stood Fleet Commander Theknos, a figure that made even other Escatar seem small by comparison. His carapace bore the ritual scarification that marked him as one of the Dominion's most elite naval commanders, and his forearms moved in perfect coordination as he monitored the approach to humanity's home system. "Fleet Commander Theknos," Chun said, stepping out of concealment with her rifle trained on the alien center mass. "I am Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chun of the United Earth Forces. Your fleet is under attack, your communications are compromised, and your vessels are being systematically captured throughout your formation." The fleet commander turned slowly, his 4 glowing eyes focusing on the human soldier who had somehow penetrated the most secure vessel in Escatar naval service. Around them, alien officers began reaching for weapons while automated defense systems activated with mechanical precision. "Remarkable," Theknos said, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "You have achieved something that should be impossible, soft flesh. You have brought war to the heart of a battle fleet that could destroy your entire civilization." "That's the plan," Chen replied, her tactical displays showing the progress of human teams throughout the alien fleet. Over 90% of boarding operations had been successful, with Special Forces teams capturing or sabotaging vessels across the entire formation. The battle that raged throughout the Escatar fleet represented the ultimate fusion of human creativity and military desperation. Special Forces teams moved through alien vessels like deadly phantoms, using capture technology and improvised tactics to turn superior firepower against itself. Demolition specialists triggered ammunition explosions that crippled entire ships. Electronics warfare units corrupted navigation systems that sent vessels spinning helplessly through space. Assault teams captured bridge facilities and locked alien crews out of their own command systems. Within hours, the carefully coordinated formation that had been assembled to destroy Earth dissolved into chaos, as ship after ship fell to enemies that seemed to materialize from empty space and vanish before defenders could respond. "Fleet status report," Chun demanded, keeping her rifle trained on Theknos while her teams completed their systematic takeover of the flagship. 87 vessels captured or destroyed, Rodriguez reported from his position in the ship's engine room. Remaining units are breaking formation and retreating toward hyperspace jump points. Fleet cohesion has completely collapsed. Chen looked around at the alien bridge, now controlled by soldiers from species that had been dismissed as incapable of meaningful resistance. Through the massive viewports, she could see Escatar vessels fleeing in all directions as their carefully planned assault dissolved into panic. Fleet Commander Theknos, she said, turning back to the alien who had planned humanity's extinction. I want you to send a message to your superiors. Tell them that Earth is defended by more than orbital platforms and space fleets. The fleet commander studied Chun with eyes that reflected something she had never seen in alien features before: respect. What message would you have me send, warrior? Tell them that humanity has learned something important about apex predators during this war. Chun replied. Tell them that even the most dangerous hunters can become prey if they underestimate their targets. And tell them that if they want to finish what they started, they better think of something besides overwhelming force. The aftermath of Operation Ragnarok transformed the strategic balance of the war in ways that no conventional military victory could have achieved. The destruction of the SE-Qatar battle fleet eliminated their capability to launch direct assaults on human core worlds, while the intelligence gathered from captured vessels provided tactical advantages that would influence the conflict for years to come. But, more importantly, the psychological impact of the operation shattered SE-Qatar's assumptions about technological determinism and species superiority. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they faced enemies who could turn superior technology into a liability, who could transform overwhelming numerical advantage into fatal weakness, and who refused to accept defeat no matter how hopeless the situation appeared. 1 year later, Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Nemesis, humanity's first starship to incorporate technology reverse-engineered from captured SE-Qatar vessels. Around her, human fleet units moved through space with capabilities that would have seemed impossible just months before, while special forces teams continued to hunt alien installations throughout their former occupation zones. The war continued, but its nature had fundamentally changed. The SE-Qatar no longer moved through space with the confidence of apex predators hunting helpless prey. They approached every operation with the caution of professional soldiers facing opponents who had proven their ability to turn any advantage into a weapon. Status report from the frontier sectors. Chun requested from her command staff. SE-Qatar forces continue to withdraw from forward positions throughout human space, reported her intelligence officer. Our psychological warfare operations have created significant morale problems among their military units, and their strategic planning has become increasingly defensive rather than offensive. Chun nodded, studying tactical displays that showed a conflict that had evolved far beyond the simple extermination campaign that the aliens had originally planned. The SE-Qatar were learning to fear humanity, not because humans were stronger or more technologically advanced, but because they had proven that desperation combined with ingenuity could overcome any technological advantage. What's the assessment of their current strategic objectives? She asked. Intelligence indicates a fundamental shift in Dominion military doctrine. They're no longer attempting to exterminate human civilization. They're trying to contain it. Their operations focus on preventing human expansion rather than eliminating human territory. The implications were profound. Humanity had evolved from victims fighting for survival to a recognized threat that required containment rather than simple destruction. The species that had once been dismissed as soft flesh prey had become apex predators in their own right. Admiral Hayes wants to see you in the communications center, announced her aide. Priority Alpha transmission from Earth Command. Chun made her way through corridors that hummed with the efficient activity of a military organization that had learned to fight impossible odds and win. When she reached the communications center, Admiral Hayes' image was waiting in the holographic display, her expression carrying news that would reshape humanity's understanding of their place in the galaxy. Sarah, we've just received contact from the Altarian Coalition, a group of 17 different species that have been fighting the SE-Qatar for over 2 centuries. They're requesting alliance negotiations based on our demonstrated capability to resist Dominion expansion. Chun felt a cold smile spread across her face as she realized the implications. Humanity was no longer fighting alone against an enemy that seemed invincible. They had become part of a larger coalition of species that refused to surrender to SE-Qatar supremacy. Terms, she asked. Full military alliance, including technology sharing, coordinated strategic planning, and mutual defense agreements. They want to learn our special forces doctrine and adapt it for use by their own military forces. The war that had begun with humanity as helpless victims facing extinction had evolved into something the SE-Qatar had never anticipated, a galactic resistance movement that threatened the very foundations of their expanding empire. The species they had dismissed as inferior had become teachers, showing other civilizations that technological superiority could be overcome through courage, ingenuity, and the simple refusal to accept defeat. Chen looked out through the bridge viewports at stars that no longer seemed cold and hostile, but filled with potential allies who had learned that even apex predators could be brought down by prey that fought with intelligence rather than strength. The SEK-TAR had believed humanity was frail, until battle-scarred troops taught them that the most dangerous enemies were those who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, humanity was fighting not for survival, but for victory. And across the galaxy, other species were learning that even the mightiest predators could become prey when faced with enemies who refused to die quietly.